All right. Hello, everyone. So glad to have you with us today. All of you participants who have joined are registered for the Green Inventors Challenge. We're really happy to have you be a part of this first contest, which is hosted by One Montgomery Green and SAPPlings and sponsored by Forbright Bank. Let me quickly shout out to Wendy Howard, who has joined us today. Wendy is the executive director of One Montgomery Green. Wendy, would you like to introduce OMG to the students?
Wonderful. I'm so pleased, Laura, to be here and excited to work with the students. This is an exciting challenge for us at One Montgomery Green. We're a nonprofit here located in Montgomery County, Maryland. And our hope is to support models of sustainability. So I really think when we use model, that we might see some models coming up in there, but I really look forward to what the students have to offer. We are here to help. If there's anything more or questions, I'm happy to help, but I look forward to learning more about what Forbright is going to talk to us about today as well. So thank you.
I'm Laura Barnitz, and I'm the coordinator of One Montgomery Green's youth program, SAPPlings. SAPPlings is a group created by Montgomery County students for Montgomery County students, and now in its third year. It's a place for youth in our county to discuss environmental and sustainability challenges with other students. It's a place to learn about internships, career opportunities, and activities related to the environment, and a place to develop leadership skills through community action. So why are we hosting this contest? Our world faces several urgent environmental challenges that I know you're all aware of that threaten our climate, our food, water, and all living things. These challenges, if they are not addressed successfully, will affect the lives of everyone, especially the young people who are in the process of becoming our world's leaders. And we need youth to help us find solutions. We're offering today's webinar to help you make your presentation the best it can be. If you have your rubric open, you can see where today's webinar will come in very handy. I will also put a link to the rubric in the chat so you can access that. Two things quickly before I introduce our presenter. One, if you are one of those who has not sent their parental permission slip back to me, you must do that, and I really need them by tomorrow. And secondly, just for your information, we are recording this session so that other members of your team who might not have been able to participate today can watch later. Please use the Q&A to ask questions, and we will do our best to answer those. Now, let me introduce our guest speaker today. You're going to hear from a dynamic woman I met last summer at Forbright Bank's Sustainability Summit, which I imagine she will tell you more about. Natalie Chapman is the Director of Community Impact for Forbright Bank. In this role, she drives purposeful and impactful partnerships with local and national nonprofit organizations in alignment with the bank's sustainability mission. Prior to this role, Natalie was an educator for more than a decade. She earned a bachelor's degree from Southern Methodist University and a master's degree from Columbia University. She lives in Washington, D.C. with her husband and two young children, all of whom enjoyed the snow this week. With that, I turn it over to you, Natalie.
Thank you, Laura, for that introduction. And Wendy and Laura, I am so excited to be here. It's been fun to get to know both of you and the SAPPlings over the last year. So I'm really looking forward to this today. Thank you for the invitation. And all of you students, thank you for being here today. I know you probably enjoyed a snow day, but also the snow day can make for disruptions, and especially disruptions to plans. And so I'm really grateful that you have all made the time to be here today. So I am going to share my screen. And if at any point, though, you have questions that you want to put into the chat, please do so. I'm happy for this to be interactive. Today, we are going to talk about determining finances. you might be wondering, why are we talking about determining finances within this competition, which is not explicitly a finance competition, right? But it's actually important for businesses to be profitable so that they can scale. And in the case of your businesses, so that they can scale their impact. Finances really just means managing your money. And so my goal today is that you become more familiar with ways that you can determine your finances to ensure that your business is as successful as possible. Today, these are the three pieces that we will go through. Determining the basics of determining finances, reviewing, and potentially a little bit of group work, just depending on the time piece there. I realize your groups are not here, but you'll be able to start thinking about your business. So a little bit about me. Laura, I know, gave a quick overview. Thank you, Laura. As she mentioned, am the Director of Community Impact at Forbright Bank. And Forbright Bank is a bank that is headquartered in Montgomery County. You might have seen it if you've ever been to Pike and Rose. There's a branch in Rockville, for example, as well. But we also do a lot of national lending, and we are really focused on helping support this transition to a low carbon economy. So we lend to different businesses. When you put your money in a bank, it doesn't just sit there. Banks lend it out. And so we are really committed to responsible and sustainable lending. Some examples are a company called Divert. They turn food waste into renewable energy. Or the largest school bus company. They are looking to electrify their fleet. And so we are supporting that with our financing. In my role, I get to oversee the ways that we support our community through volunteering and grant making. I live in DC, actually, so I'm not in Montgomery County, although I have several friends trying to get me over there with my daughter and my son. So it's been a really fun couple days in the snow. And as Laura mentioned, I was a teacher for many years. So that's a little bit about me. So let's dive into the basics of determining finances so that your business can be as successful as possible. When you're determining your finances or you're managing your money, it's important to consider three of these pieces. They're not the only pieces you need to consider, but these are three pieces that can be helpful to consider. First is your key metrics. These are the numbers that tell you how your business is doing. How healthy is your business? Then the cost structure. Cost is how much money you spend. And then revenue is the income generated by the sale of goods or services. If your costs, just like in your personal life, if you're spending more than you bring in, that's a problem, right? You're in the red. So the same is true with your business. You want to make sure that a very minimum, your revenue is equal to that cost structure, but ideally that your revenue is more than your cost structure so that your business is making money. What you'll see over here on the right is a lean business Canva. And this is a tool that a lot of entrepreneurs to seasoned companies use to make sure that when they have a business idea, it's on the right track. It's something that they can use to brainstorm the beginning stages of their businesses, but they can also use it to pitch it to investors. So let's dive into this a little bit more. The first piece to consider is your cost structure. I mentioned this earlier. Cost is how much money is going out. What are you spending, right? And there are two types of costs. There are fixed costs and variable costs. With fixed cost, it's going to be constant regardless of the quantity of goods or services produced. For example, your office rent. If you have an office space, that is going to remain constant regardless of how many goods or services you sell. Your equipment, for example, if you have to have a specific piece of equipment to make a product, that is going to be a fixed cost regardless if you sell 50 hats or 1,000 hats, whatever the product is. Another example could be a vehicle. If you have a delivery service, it doesn't matter. It will change perhaps a bit, but in the beginning, if you have one vehicle and you deliver one thing a day or you deliver 100 a day, that is going to be a fixed cost. Then we have what are called variable costs. These are going to change depending on the quantity of your goods or services produced. I have some examples here on the screen. Customer service is one. Our bank has grown very quickly in the last 2 years. And as a result, we have more customers, which is a great thing, right? That means that we've had to bring on more customer support staff to make sure that our customers are supported. That is a variable cost depending on how many customers we have. If you think about the raw materials, if you are creating, for example, a meal delivery service and you have to create the meals, if you sell 10 meals, then that's one set of costs, right? To create those meals. If you sell 200 or 2,000, your variable costs are going to increase. Same with your packaging supplies. The more you sell, the more your variable costs are. It is interesting how some companies can have higher variable cost, but some actually have low variable cost and they have more high upfront costs. An example with that could be a software company that sells digital products. They would have a very high initial development cost, right? Maybe they have pretty consistent fixed cost, their office space for their employees to come to, for example, but their variable cost as time goes on are going to be very low because a software company has developed the platform. Yes, they're going to want to make updates, but they don't have delivery costs. They don't have packaging supplies. So that is not going to change depending on the number of goods or services that they sell. And as I mentioned, if you have any questions while I'm going, feel free to put them in the chat. One important thing before I move on here. If a business cannot afford to pay their costs, then that business is in the red, right? It cannot be a successful business. And you have amazing ideas that we want to make sure can scale and really make an impact on your community and your world. And so it's important that your costs are not more than your sources of revenue, which leads me to your revenue stream. Revenue is how do you make money? And it is argued that often it is helpful to have multiple sources of revenue in order to be a healthy business. That's not always the case, though. A lot of companies, actually most, the research shows, have one form of revenue stream. A lot of times that might be product sales, for example. But it can be helpful to have multiple streams of revenue. These are some ways that you can make money. Subscriptions, especially now, are very common. You've probably been bombarded on social media with different subscriptions you could sign up for, from tangible delivery services to digital subscriptions. There's also licensing, product sales, which I mentioned is probably the most common source of revenue. There's services and consulting. So you might have a lot of expertise in composting. So not only do you have a composting subscription, but you also provide your services and your consulting to other companies that want to get that off the ground. That could be one example. Advertising. So you can get advertising dollars. As an influencer, for example, they might have advertising dollars. They have subscriptions. They have podcasts, right? They have all different forms of revenue streams. You can be really creative there. Additionally, leasing and renting. Maybe you have an office space, but you rent out a part of that office to other individuals or companies. That's another way to bring in revenue. And then brokerage fees. So I also want to bring this to like a really small scale example. Pretend you have a car. You could just drive that car, which most people, that's what they would do with their car, right? They use it to get from point A to point B. You could also use that car as several sources of revenue. Maybe you rent it out. There is some, if you really are trustworthy, there are some companies where you can actually rent out your car for a day or a period of time. Maybe you use it and you become an Uber driver as well. And then also maybe you sell ad space on your car. So sometimes on the headrest, there's an ad that's playing on repeat. That's 3 sources of revenue with one vehicle. So I want to just challenge you to get creative, to think about the different sources of revenue. that you could use to make income for your company so that your income is greater than your costs. You can also think big scale, Amazon. They have many sources of income, right? It started as a book selling company and now it's limitless. The other piece I want to look at today as you are determining the finances of your business are key metrics. So some of you might be super qualitative and some of you might really like to get into quantitative metrics. This is going to be helpful if you think about investors investing in your company and you think of the health of your business. As I mentioned, you need to earn a profit in order to stay afloat. That is going to be very important. And so these metrics can help you gauge that. If you want to take a screenshot of it, it might be a helpful tool as you're preparing your presentations. These are some metrics that you can include to show that you have thought about the financial health of your business. I'll run through them. Gross profit is your total revenue minus the cost of goods or services sold. As I've said before, you want to make sure that that is at the very least at breaking even, but likely that, so at 0 would be breaking even, but better is that it's above 0. If it's a negative number, that means that you are going to need to cut some of your costs, whether it's your fixed, probably your variable, to make sure that you are making a profit. This here, oh, sorry.
Natalie, I'm just going to just jump in here because we did have one question from Shreyas asking, what would you say is a good profit margin to maintain a buffer between revenue and costs?
That's a good question. I think there's not like a specific hard and fast answer. Some people say like a general rule of thumb is a 10% net profit margin. So you can consider that. 20% would like be pretty high, which is actually good, right? 5% would be pretty low. You want to make sure that you have a buffer. That being said, you can think about something in a startup phase is probably going to be different than something that is more established. And I'll update this slide so that you have the updated here because I have gross profit and net profit, and I want to make sure that you have the updated version here. And then we have your profit margin. Oh, I can't see your faces. I was going to ask if any of you are familiar with that. But if you think about profit margin, this is just another way to express it as a percentage. So what I just said was like 20% would be a very healthy percentage, right? And so this is something that you could use as that metric. Something you might also look at is customer loyalty or retention. There are different ways you can calculate this out, but what is the price per customer of retaining that customer? If you're spending, I don't know, $5,000 on advertising, is that getting you one customer? Is that getting you 5,000 customers? Think about what is that price per customer for retaining them. And then revenue growth is how is your company growing year to year? Any more questions there? That was an excellent question. So let's go ahead and try it. This will require a little interaction from you in the chat. I want you to put yourself in the mindset of you are starting a business and it's a coffee shop. This is not a product, right? You're not creating a product, so it might be a little different from what you're doing in the competition. But a group of friends is passionate about coffee and entrepreneurship. That's you. And you have decided to open a student-run coffee shop on campus focused on promoting sustainability. We're going to spend a little bit of time determining the cost structure, the revenue streams, and the key metrics. So take just 30 seconds in the chat, and you can also Google search key metrics. Like there are a list of 50. I picked probably what would be like the top 5 for me. but there are 50 that you can look at beyond, right? What are some key metrics that you would look at? These are what we discussed briefly, the gross profit, the net profit. And what I will say is the gross profit is going to be like, what are you bringing in without taking away those expenses? So I'll give you that updated slide. But the gross profit, the net profit, profit margin, so that percentage number there, and then maybe your customer loyalty and retention costs. Now I want you to think about the cost structure. In the chat, can you please put in what would be some of the fixed costs of this coffee shop? What would be some of the fixed costs of this coffee shop? Okay. Building rent, absolutely. That would be a fixed cost. That's not going to change regardless of the number of goods or services sold. Exactly. And then if you could put into the chat, what would be some variable costs for this coffee shop? What is going to change depending on the number of goods or services sold? Coffee prices, definitely. How many beans you have to buy. And I know you can't necessarily speak into here, but I would ask, do you think that the equipment is going to be a fixed or a variable? Yes, fixed is going to be the equipment. Employee cost. That is a great one. Employee cost is initially probably going to be fixed, right? Maybe you have 2 people working the coffee shop regardless. But if you were then to expand, you would have to adjust that amount. I don't know how much room you have for multiple employees. So you might have a max fixed number of employees that you can have. But if you were to expand, that would become a new cost. So here's what we have here. Excellent. The ingredients, the milk, the coffee beans, those are all variable costs. Whereas the machines, the coffee grinders, the rent, the supplies, those are all going to be fixed. Variable, you can also think about, yes, this one I go back and forth. So coffee beans, milk, syrups, definitely a variable cost. Staff, you're going to have a minimum, right? So let's say you have a minimum of 2, but if you need to increase because you're busy or you need to cut back because you're less busy, that is going to change. So we'll count it as a variable cost here. When it would become fixed is if they were salaried. So if you had a constant salary, that would then become fixed regardless of the number of employees you had. Marketing and advertising, that is going to be variable. You might increase it 1 month, decrease it a next. At open, you're probably going to have a lot more advertising. And then repairs could change from month to month. And then let's think about revenue streams. What could be the different kinds of revenue streams that you could have at your coffee shop? If you would please put those in the chat. People buying the coffee, tips. Nice. Yep. So I put on here, definitely, I agree. The coffee and beverage sales, that's going to be your number 1 revenue stream, but also get a little creative. Do you have food at your coffee shop to have an additional source of revenue? Could you have merchandise? So t-shirts, reusable coffee mugs. Maybe they even get a little discount if they use the mug and bring it back. Could you expand to even catering services outside? So these are all things to think of. But really considering that you want your revenue to be more than your cost structure, right? So that your net income is positive. Ideally, with that margin around 10% at least, knowing that that could be different. Any questions there? We're going to go ahead and review. Thank you to those of you that have participated so far. We're actually going to review with a little bit of Kahoot. So I'm going to stop sharing. I'm going to share a different screen. If you cannot see this, go ahead and put it in the chat so that I can make sure I've got you there, but you can go ahead and put in a game pin. Wendy and Laura, feel free to play as well. Before you start this, I want to make sure you have a fair advantage. So the gross profit, just keep this in mind because I will update that slide. But the gross profit is just what is the revenue you bring in without taking away the expenses. And net profit is what you bring in, your income, your revenue, minus the cost of the goods or products sold. So I'll make sure I send an update. All right. We ready to dive in? True or false? The image below is the Lean Business Canvas. We're at 6 answers. Absolutely. Yes, that is true. That is a Lean Business Canvas. I'm not going to tell you what it's used for because I think you're going to see that coming up. Quick, nice job. All right, here we go. When is the best time to construct a lean business model? Okay, good. So thank you for not choosing only in the morning or after dinner, although some of you might focus more in the morning or after dinner. It's recommended that you construct it in the very early stages to make sure that it's a viable business idea. Is there a market for it? And as we think about the finances, is this actually a viable opportunity? Could this actually be a profitable business? You don't want to get all the way into writing the plan and then realize you're not going to make any money off of it or that it won't be able to stay afloat. Well, we changed it up. All right, here we go. Yes, it is. And I know this is on here 3 times, and I did that because I want to reiterate that this is a really valuable tool that I would recommend you even download as you're thinking about your business model to make sure you've really thought about the details. You might have a brilliant idea, but to really make sure that it's going to be a viable business. How does creating a lean business canvas help your business idea? It can be used to seek investors. It provides a visual representation to see if an idea is worth pursuing, both A and B, or because it is less effort than writing a business plan. A and B are both correct. You can use it to share your business idea, to pitch it to investors. In the case of your competition, you can pitch it to these judges, but it also allows you to see this visual representation to make sure that it is an idea that is worth pursuing. You don't want it to cost $1 million and you only make $5, right? That's not going to be a viable business model. All right, here we go. Which answer choice is an example of a variable cost? Equipment, rent, raw materials, or property tax? Which one is going to be a variable cost? Raw materials are going to be the variable cost because the equipment, let's say that you have to get, like the coffee maker in the example of the coffee shop. You need one coffee maker, regardless if you serve 1 cup of coffee or 200 cups of coffee that day, you need that one coffee maker. Of course, that could change as your business scales, but by and large, day to day, it's going to be fixed. Whereas the raw materials are going to change regardless of, or depending on how many goods or services you sell. So for example, for every cup of coffee, you're going to have to spend, I don't know the exact price of coffee. Let's say that cup of coffee cost you 25 cents. So if you sell 1 cup of coffee, your costs are 25 cents for the raw materials. However, if you sell 200 cups of coffee, those raw materials are going to increase because you're going to use more coffee grounds, right? You're going to maybe need more sugar for all of those cups of coffee. Any questions there? All right, going on up. Here we go. Which is not an example of a revenue stream? Okay, so food sales, definitely an example of revenue. It's how you can make money. Merchandise sales, it's another way to make money. Lawn mowing service sales, that is potentially a way for a company to make money. Many people have lawn mowing businesses. They make money, they have an income, they have revenue from that company. Salary is not an example of revenue. That's actually a cost. Questions there? Here we go. That really shook it up. The student-run coffee shop's monthly revenue is $10,000 and the cost of goods is $8,500. What is the net profit? Remember, gross, you're not subtracting your costs, but net, you are going to subtract your costs. Excellent. So that net profit is going to be 10,000. You're going to find it by doing 10,000 minus 8,500. So you're taking the revenue and you're subtracting the costs. So your net profit is $1,500. Any questions there? Here we go. Last question. An app's revenue is $15,500. The fixed cost is $5,000 and the variable cost is $3,750. What is the app's net profit? Might have to get out those calculators. Ugh. Guys, the wrong one. No, 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 this is not correct. Everyone in the yellow was correct. No, everyone in the yellow was correct. So, what you do is you take 15,500 and you subtract the 5,000 and then you subtract the 3,750, which is 6,750. Oh my goodness. So these are going to be totally skewed. But let's still celebrate some here. Excellent job. Excellent job. Forgive me on the last one. That one actually, the majority of you were correct in your calculations for that net profit, but excellent job. All right, I'm going to X out of that. And then before I close it out, and I'll send you the updated deck. I want to ask if anyone has any questions. Thank you for participating. And again, sorry for that last one. But I'm really, really grateful that you all participated there. And I hope it was clarifying, especially to see that that net profit is going to be your total revenue minus the cost of goods and services sold. It's going to be really important that that is a positive number, right? It's not a negative number, to make sure that you have a viable business. If there are no, oh, here. Could we take an approach of a kind of gig-based business model where there's no full-time employees, but rather we pay people per product created? I'd love to hear a little bit more about that, because what I'm kind of understanding it as is contract workers. So they're not salaried, but they're really billing you based on the hour. Or in this case, based on the product. So you would contract them out per product, in which case that would be a variable approach, depending on how many products you want to create. Wendy and Laura, I don't know if you have anything else to add on that one.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I understand where you're getting at there, and it just raises a point that I wanted to share, because some of you may be in the mindset of thinking that you are creating an invention type of product, or an invention that would be used in a more academic setting or for research purposes, and that's totally fine. But keep that, even though you're going with that kind of approach, having the information about what your costs are, fixed and variable, will serve you well in the challenge in any kind of situation. So use that. I think that what Natalie has shared is really valuable, no matter how you're approaching your product, service, or invention for the Green Inventors Challenge.
Great point. And I was going to ask you to sort of expound on that, really, Natalie, on sort of why are we taking a business approach to some of these things? And I think, maybe you could talk a little bit about sort of why we're thinking in these terms.
Sure.
Please.
Yeah, because I don't want you to think it's like our founder, John Delaney, he served in Congress on the Climate Caucus and was very, of course, like that was very involved in the political world at that time to think about how can we help transition to this low carbon economy and really make some progress on these climate goals as a country and as a world. And then when that time wrapped up and he founded the bank, that was another tool to help transition to a low carbon economy. We also know that One Montgomery Green and organizations similar are also really critical to achieving these goals. But we can't, I would argue, we can't fully transition to this low carbon economy if it's not going to be viable financially, because at the end of the day, for these products to scale, they have to somewhat eventually be affordable, right? In order for if we think about products, for example, or goods and services, in order for the most people to be able to use them. An example, and Wendy, you could probably speak more to this, is businesses composting, right? Restaurants have a lot of food waste annually. If it's going to cost them $100,000 a year to compost the food waste, it's probably not a viable option for them, because that's a cost, right? That is going to take away from their net profit. However, Wendy, I know you worked with different businesses. If this can be a much more affordable, where maybe it costs them $5,000 a year, right? Or we could even get it to, even less than that, where it's easier to swallow and less impactful on their bottom line. Imagine how many more businesses can compost. And so we want to have it as accessible as possible to individuals and businesses. Does that help there?
Yes. Yeah. I think you put that in a good light. Exactly. I think
Excellent.
That's really important. Good.
Thank you. And before we do wrap up, because I want to be respectful of everyone's time, I want to make sure that I do share the key metrics so that you can take an updated screenshot.
There you go.
Okay, so if you look at gross profit, just to make sure that this is really, really clear. For gross profit, you're taking your total revenue minus the cost of goods and services. So how much did it cost you to make that cup of coffee? Right? How much did it cost you to make those 100 cups of coffee? What ultimately are you profiting? Just taking away the cost to make those cups of coffee. Net profit is going to be minus your total costs. So you have to think about your revenue minus those costs of goods and services, but also your rent, also the equipment to make that, right? Also what you're going to pay to your employees. All of those different costs represent the total cost. So that's the difference between gross profit and net profit. Net profit is definitely going to be smaller than your gross profit because it takes into account more costs. Is that helpful?
Yeah.
I would be remiss before I sign off to say, if you have been interested in this session or you've really enjoyed this competition and working with your team, we would love for you to join us at the Sustainable Solutions Summit this summer with Forbright Bank and Black Student Fund. One Montgomery Green was very, very involved in it, and we hope they will be again this summer. It's a week for you to get together with some awesome individuals. I mean, every single individual that attended, and I see you, Ms. DeWitt here. It was a great group, and you developed business solutions to local environmental issues. So here's a QR code. If you're interested at all, you can show your interest. And I know Laura and Wendy, I can share information with you that you could possibly share out. So I think a big difference would be, rather than being virtual and spread out across these couple of weeks, if you really want to dive in for a week in person, this would be a really great follow-up to this competition that you're doing. We just go a little bit deeper.
I want to shout out on this one because we attended it this summer and it was such an amazing program. And I know participating today, I know she's online with us, Natanya DeWitt from Walter Johnson High School was one of our participants from SAPPlings last summer. She did an amazing job in the summit, and she's the one who actually has spearheaded the work by SAPPlings to get this Green Inventors Challenge underway this winter break. So yay.
Yeah, she's phenomenal. Really, really phenomenal. And I love how you've taken this idea and run with it. I think that's what we need, right? To help make this transition in our world and our community. So thank you, Nathania. really amazing.
There's one more question for you in the chat.
Oh, yeah. And I can't reply, it looks like.
It says, does
No,
this
but
mean-
yes, I can
you
see it.
that?
So yes, that's
Okay.
exactly it. So you're taking away, well, it's not necessarily the variable cost because you're not subtracting advertising. So you're just taking away those costs of producing the product. So the coffee beans, right? The milk that goes into creating the latte, those are the costs to create that product, that individual product. Whereas net profit is subtracting all of those costs, variable and fixed. Great question. What I would really, for this competition, I would probably encourage you to really look at the net profit. I think that's going to be probably like speak the loudest to say that you really understand, here's what I plan for my total revenue. Here's what I plan for the total cost. That means, you know, all of my fixed costs plus whatever those individual variable costs would be. I think that's where I would really encourage you to go. And what I will do is I'll put my, oh, I can't put my email in the chat, can I?
We can do that for you.
Okay, if you could put my email in the chat, that would be great. Feel free to reach out. I'm happy to look at anything in these next couple weeks if that's helpful, and to answer any additional questions that you have.
Thank you, Natalie. That's really generous. And we will encourage students to take full advantage of your kindness as they
Thank you.
prepare for the challenge on January 29th. And I am just going to remind everyone that very soon you will be getting an invitation to schedule your team's time slot on the 29th for that presentation. Remember, you've got 5 minutes. It's not a lot of time, but it shall suffice. And there will be a few additional minutes where the judges will ask you questions. If there are any other questions for me, I'm happy to stay on a little bit and try to field those. And of course, you can always email me as well. But I would like to thank Natalie so much for her presentation, taking time and being a part of this challenge with Forbright Bank.
I want to second that and thank Forbright Bank for being such an advocate, a supporter, and a sponsor for this. I mean, you came through immediately, Natalie, when we brought this idea to you, and I love that. So yes, in fact, we definitely want to help with the summit again. I thought that was such an exciting, I loved being on the panel, hint, hint. You know,
We'd love to have
really,
you back, Wendy.
yay! I thought that was just great. It was wonderful to being a part of it, and I was really impressed with what the students did.
Yeah,
I know I'm going to
me
be just
too.
as equally impressed here.
Oh, I leave these so hopeful and excited for our future. So thank you all. I'm excited to see what you come up with. So I'll hope to attend that event. I will not be a judge, but I will hope to attend it.
Great. We look forward to having you.
Excellent. And students, thank you for attending and taking the time.
Wonderful. All right, if students have any additional questions, please fire away. Right now, I'm happy to answer those if possible. And otherwise, enjoy the rest of your day. And we will get this up online for those who weren't able to attend today as soon as possible.
Great. Thanks, everyone.
Bye, Natalie.
Bye.
Any questions, participants? No, maybe not. Just, oh, I see a question. If our presentation, okay, the question is, I was wondering if our presentation will be with a slideshow or a pitch format. That is completely up to you. We leave it in your hands how you want to make that presentation, which will be the most effective way for your group to present what you're doing in the 5 minutes that you're allotted. The only caution I have is if you decide to use a slideshow presentation, it's fine. But remember, you do have to show your physical model of your product or invention, if that's what you're doing, or you have to show as in a demonstration of how your service would work. acting that out or showing us the stakeholders in that service. So you can go either way, but you will probably need to do a little more than only a slideshow presentation. Do I have another one who I've missed? No. Okay. Gotcha. Okay. Any other questions? All right. I'm going to sign off then, and wishing you all the best of luck. Bye. Talk to you later, Wendy.